I don't think any of them need real introduction, but I'm delighted to have Tracy first up, actually, particularly since it's International Women's Day. And that Tracy is a real role model, genuinely, the first Metro Mayor, female Metro Mayor, former MP of Batley and Spen from 2016 till 21, but a real role model, and absolutely delighted to have you, Tracy, and talking about how you're seeing the development of good employment and fair work within the West Yorkshire region. And then, of course, Andy Burnham, who will be well known to all of you, a very leading politician in our country over many years, held ministerial positions with the Labour Party for quite a number of years, and ranging from the Home Office, Department of Health and Treasury, and was Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport in 2008, but now doing an incredible job as Greater Manchester Metro Mayor into your second term now, Andy, aren't you? With a lot of support. So delightful to have you here. And then last but not least, Steve Rotherham, who we're hoping will be able to join us. Steve, of course, is Metro Mayor for Liverpool. He started his career as a councillor in Liverpool and was also elected as a Member of Parliament in 2010 for the Liverpool-Walton constituency. So 3 wonderful speakers. And really what I'm going to do is just let each of you sort of talk a little bit about how you are seeing a couple of key things. One, of course, is your commitment and support to the idea of good and fair work and how you're seeing that progressing, but also give you an opportunity perhaps to talk a little bit about the Levelling Up agenda, the Levelling Up white paper, because that is very relevant, of course, to what some of the things you're trying to do within your regions and support. So without further ado, Tracy, why don't I let you kick us off?
Lovely. Thanks so much, Peter, and to CIPD for asking me to this important event. And honestly, there can't be a more important time to be having this conversation. I'm wearing hot pink, you may notice. Obviously, as you mentioned, it's International Women's Day. And I spent the afternoon with a group of Year 10 girls at the Leeds College of Building. And they're all trying their hand at what's, I suppose, seen as male professions, whether that's painting, carpentry and architecture, transport, and their industry is dominated by men, and they're trying to break the bias and trying to get more young women into those sectors and teaching them that there's skilled, well-paid work to be found, if only you know where to look. But also, it's about the times we're living in. I don't know if any of you were watching the Zelensky speech. It's very troubling times around the world, but for our country, cost of living crisis, this terrible war. And we know how devastating this economic uncertainty and insecurity is for so many people. And everybody's feeling it. And you, me, our citizens at the pump, at the supermarket, our energy bills. But for those in insecure work, poorly paid work, where their money runs out on Wednesday and they've no more money coming in, but bills are still piling up. It's, I would suggest, an incredibly terrifying time right now, because we can't afford to get it wrong on work, because when we do, the costs are just too big to bear for people. Unemployment, poor mental health, got that workplace stress, and these issues don't affect someone's well-being only. They impact on our entire economy. They hold our workforce back and threaten to extinguish the promise of our regions as we come out of COVID and look to the future. And that's why I'm so focused on delivering the promises I made during my election to build that diverse and inclusive and resilient economy in West Yorkshire, and backing businesses to ensure everyone has those skills to get on. I'm really proud that in the 10 months I've been the mayor, we've already introduced Enterprise West Yorkshire, £6 million worth of training for entrepreneurs, making sure that those great ideas, those innovators get the support they need. But because I'm the mayor, and with my lived experience, I can say 50% of that cohort will be women, 20% will come from Black, Asian, minority, ethnic communities, and 3% would define themselves as disabled. And I promised to create 1,000 skilled green jobs. We're working on our Green Jobs Task Force, and already our partners have over 500 jobs pledged in less than a year. And of course, the pledges are the floor, then they're not the ceiling, and there's so much more that we're going to be doing. And certainly when, according to the ONS, 1/3 of employees in West Yorkshire are in quality work. So what about the other third? 1/3 of our million-strong workforce, many with families, don't enjoy good work when it comes to pay and conditions. Economic recovery plan, and that looks to address some of this, obviously reflecting the new reality that we're seeing with the cost of living crisis. But if the pandemic gave us one good thing, it's that I think people are beginning to question their employers, to understand their own value and prioritize their need for that good work-life balance. That shift to flexible hybrid working is now, I would suggest, irreversible. And actually, so it should be. It's widely recognized that increasing the quality of work, including employees' well-being, it does boost productivity. And that's why the Business Productivity and Resilience Plan sees good work as one of the main business behaviours that's going to drive our region's productivity. Of course, it's not all about the 9 to 5, that Dolly Parton shift. It's about freelancers, it's about creatives, it's about the self-employed being treated fairly and paid properly by the big organisations and those venues that commission them. So our Fair Work Charter was one of my manifesto pledges. Thankfully, we're not going from a standing start because, as you mentioned, Peter, we've got the brilliant examples across the north. Any business that gets a grant from the LEP also must commit to improving the lot of their workforce, paying the real living wage, using flexible working arrangements, supporting workforce well-being. We're also asking more from our businesses when we commission, asking them to deliver flagship schemes and services that add that social value that's so important. And our Fair Work Charter is a piece of that jigsaw, that to get as many employers as possible, all shapes, sizes, sectors, signing up to provide that fair work. And it means opportunity, it means security and well-being, and employees having a voice, and more importantly, people enjoying a sense of fulfillment. And that's why I was so pleased and felt very supported when Andy and Steve came over to Bradford University to help launch all those months ago the plan to our Fair Work Charter. And I know that our officers across the region have been working really closely together, because let's not forget, Labour Metro and Mayors represent over 20 million people. And in the north especially, just think about the potential of that. Imagine a pan-northern fair work guarantee. So I'm determined to catch up with Andy and Steve. We've a lot to do. We've a lot to implement. But I think as HR professionals like yourselves, I could ask you please wholeheartedly to respond to our consultation, because what you know about businesses is going to really help us make our Fair Work Charter relevant, meaningful, progressive, modern, and given the challenges we're all facing, fit for purpose for the future, and make it as positive and life-changing as we can for the people of West Yorkshire, standing shoulder to shoulder with Andy and Steve and Dan, who sadly is no longer going to be the mayor from May, but hopefully together that pan-northern approach is going to be really powerful. So thank you so very much for the invitation this evening, and really looking forward to hearing what Andy and Steve have got to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy. What a great start. Lots of passion and energy. Steve, welcome. It's great to have you with us, and thank you so much for joining. So as I know you know the sort of flavour of this is really sort of exploring how you're seeing the Fair Work Charters and Good Employment Charters working in your area, but this collaboration, which Tracy touched on. I remember, Steve, when we met, it was, probably 3 years ago. The pandemic's taken a big chunk of time out. And I remember you were sort of bantering a bit about saying, well, of course, we're going to take what Andy's done, but just make it a little bit better and develop it further. But anyway, why don't I pass the baton to you, Steve, in the first instance, because I know also you're a little bit time pressed this evening. But just sort of talk about how you're seeing the progress of the Charter within the Liverpool region, and sort of building a little bit on some of the thoughts that you heard from Tracy.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And hopefully you can hear me, because we've had some IT issues. I'm actually an international event tonight, a really important occasion for the Liverpool City region. And just in case anything goes wrong, genuinely, these were on the desk as I've walked in. So if If it all goes wrong, I can always start talking about Percy Pig. Tracy's give us a really good insight, and what you'll find is between Andy, Tracy, and myself, there's going to be an awful lot of similarity. But I'd say that that's a good thing, because we want consistency across the whole of the Northern Corridor if we can get it. And of course, our Fair Employment Charter, as we're calling it, and I know they're all slightly different, the three planks of the charters that we've got are all entitled something slightly differently, but it's central to the work that we're doing, because I want to make our region the fairest, most inclusive, the most socially just region in the whole country. And of course, I'll have competition for that. But personally, I believe that we're doing some great stuff. And I told you, Peter, what our intentions were when we met. And I know that other areas, Andy and Tracy, and lots of other areas are also doing some really good stuff. But at the end of the day, it's about balancing consistency with a recognition of the specific and then the local nature of our economies and our regions. All of our charters have slightly different strands, but the themes, the main themes, the germane of the whole suite of different charters are the same, and so are the goals, really. I think, if anything, over the last 2 years, the pandemic has highlighted the key role that workers in undervalued sectors have played in keeping everything going, really, haven't we? And the great debt that we owe to those people for keeping us functioning. And I've always believed in a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, but it has to be in safe, decent conditions, and there should be a minimum standard that all of us would expect in our working lives. And I think the great bulk of employers in our city region already deliver that. So the Charter is also to recognise good employers from the outset. It's not just to persuade those unscrupulous employers that they should do something else. It's actually a charter mark to say, you people are doing really good things. And so, we want to recognise that. And the Liverpool City Region Fair Employment Charter is about improvement. We don't simply want to see a continuation of business as usual, what people are already doing. We want to deliver change, and that means welcoming organisations to our charter who recognise that they have a journey to go on also, because we want them to meet our core standards. We're not going in and saying everybody must do this from day one. There is a tapering mechanism by which we think we can encourage people to do it. But it also means that we do highlight that existing good practice, and there's something called an ambassador level, and that's allowing already good employers to get even better, to support others to do so, and to lead in the city region on what excellence in the workplace can be and what it should look like. And again, that flexibility that I've highlighted is really important to take account of things such as the new ways of working. Again, during the last 2 years, many people are used to doing this now. I genuinely don't think I've done a Teams or a Zoom 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. But it's the nature of work now and what constitutes a workplace, and that is obviously changing. So we're trying to include that in what we're doing. We're also trying in different policy strands in our charter to include things like social value. So we've got a social value framework which was approved last Friday, and that's going to be a key anchor for our input into the Good Business Festival, which demonstrates a very practical way in which we can encourage and support the delivery of good businesses and good work. So it's about profit with a purpose. In addition, we're also doing stuff over the last few years. We've seen other things, not just the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement. We're responding to that. So there's a race equality program that better targets ethical investments. So we're doing some stuff on that. We've got 100 organisations already interested in signing up to our charter. But we've also got 300 in what's called our community suppliers list. And so we're now contacting them and saying, you're on our community suppliers list. you're wanting some of our money, and the quid pro quo is that you give something back to us, which is to sign up to our charter. And I think we can get a groundswell then of good organisations who are promoting this. And then as part of my manifesto, I think it was back in April, I committed to exploring how we could engage with the Fair Employment Charter, to working with the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority and its positive employers who want to use that as a demonstration of how they share my City Region's commitment to good and fair work. You know, it should be a given really, but we're trying to get all of those things lined up. Just finally, we've also got those three stages, as I say, which are aspiring, accredited, and ambassador. But we're trying to invite employers to apply at an entry level. We don't want to scare people away. The important thing is to get them through the front door first of all, and then to try to get them to progress through those stages. And we've placed a massive emphasis on mental health in the Fair Employment Charter. I spoke to a fellow called Joe Rafferty, who's the Chief Executive of Mersey Care, less than 6 months into the pandemic, and I said, come out of this pandemic, there's going to be an epidemic of mental ill health and well-being issues. So we're doing something about that, and it's an integral part of the Fair Employment Charter now. And we're having a summit which will encapsulate all of the things that we want to do in the Fair Employment Charter, but to spread that around the city region and to share best practice, to hopefully help employers who've got issues, which I'm sure everybody has, which are often hidden in the workplace. And then just on a final note, CIPD have been involved throughout this process, you know, offering employers dedicated online support. And we also recognise the role that our trade unions can play. I mean, in our area, they've been absolutely brilliant in delivering the objectives by supporting employers who share our ambition to put the Fair Employment Charter and all of the criteria within it into practice. And so I hope that wasn't too much of a run through. I'm very conscious that, I don't know whether you can hear it, but there's starting to be a little bit of noise from where I am, and that might get a little bit louder.
Probably going to get louder. Yeah, big international event, as you said, so it certainly will get louder. But thank you so much, Stephen. Really like your idea of this sort of aspiring accredited and ambassador, because as both you and Tracy pointed out, there are a huge number of things now that employers are trying to deal with. You know, all these things like diversity, different ways of working, well-being. We know nationally, of course, the real issues are skills shortages and skills gaps, how much we invest, paying the fair living wage, things of that nature. And it's how we bring all of those things together. And I think your sort of ideas of saying you don't frighten the horses with, say, smaller employers and say, you got to do all of this. You focus on some of the essentials, and then you can grow from there. But Andy, I mean, over to you. What are your sort of thoughts? I mean, I guess you were probably one of the lead metro mayors across the country, actually, in pushing some of these ideas of good employment and the good work charters.
Well, thanks, Peter. Look, we did. I think we were the first to start, but Steve quickly came in, and as he said, we have worked jointly on this because we recognised that it wouldn't help anybody if we were doing something different from Steve, from Tracy. And obviously when Tracy was elected, she was kind to say that Steve and I did go over, and we very much, the name is different in different places, but the basic construct of the thing is the same, and the way we're developing it is the same. And I think tonight's a really good event because it should become a Northern Employment Charter or whatever the name is. Well, somebody will win that debate one day, but I think this thing should go north of England wide. And what a great statement that would be, because it would be the north of England levelling ourselves up, wouldn't it? And because no one else. This is the great thing about this, Peter. It's about people, because levelling up isn't enough about people when we talk about it, and that's one thing. But it's also something we're doing for ourselves without legislation. And actually, to be honest, I think the best change is bottom-up change, isn't it? Because it involves people. And the way we developed our charter here was in that way. You were a great partner from the off, basically, yourself and Daphne and all of your team at CIPD. And we're really grateful to you for that. But obviously we involved the trade unions, the chamber, and lots of players. And because it was built by so many people, I think it's owned by so many people. And that actually really is a key part of its strength. And we'll keep building it in that way. And I think it means more to people because of that. If it was the right idea before the pandemic, Peter, it's even more the right idea now. I think, as Tracy was saying, when the tide went out in March 2020, I think we knew it wasn't great underneath, but when we really saw the world of work, didn't we, in all of its kind of insecurity and its damaging consequences for us all. The reality was there were many people here in Greater Manchester, but true in Liverpool City region and West Yorkshire, who when they were ill, they couldn't go home because of the nature of their work didn't allow that. Now, the question is, how can that be good for anybody? How can it? Well, it's not good for those people. Certainly not good for those businesses, because that will affect business continuity in any situation where somebody can't go home if they're ill. But then, of course, it's not good for society then, is it, in protecting everybody during a pandemic? So it was kind of obvious, if we kind of had a sense of it, but it really came through, isn't it, that poor work is bad for everybody. And, that is always the thing that's driven this, that if we turn this tide around and make this a movement that builds good work for everybody, puts those stronger foundations of more secure work beneath everybody, in the end, that will be better for everybody. And to pick up Steve Rotherham's point, it's not just about physical health and protection from a virus. If you're secure in your job, in terms of the hours you're going to work and what you are going to earn, you're not going to be going to bed worrying about those things the night before. So you're going to turn up to work and you're going to be ready to work, because you're not endlessly fretting about, can you afford the rent? Can you afford to pay for the kids' school uniforms, their Christmas presents? And that's why the best antidote actually to the mental health pandemic that is now with us is this movement of good, secure work for everybody. Because in the end, that will make everybody individually successful, businesses more successful, and all of us as a northern economy more successful. And that's what this is all about. Peter, we'll continue to work with you, and Tracy, Steve, and I'm sure are committed to sort of continuing to build this jointly. I've been really encouraged by the way in which the kind of idea seems to have the wind in its sails now. We've had a number of events with our Good Employment Charter team. We had an awards event last week. Daphne was there, a few others perhaps from the CIPD. The room was absolutely packed out. And the positivity that comes through these events, when we're celebrating employers as diverse as Dunster's Farm, the cottage cheese people, and Talk and Transport for Greater Manchester, and anyway, there was just such a range of different organisations, but all celebrating the fact that they were on a journey towards good work. I think it is capturing the mood of colleagues in the private sector, but also other sectors as well. We've got 50 members of the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter, 350 supporters, and it's growing all of the while. So it's building out at pace now, which is absolutely fantastic. To pick up a point you made before, I think the charter is designed in such a way that people can kind of move through the layers. So you can start with the commitment as a supporter, and that's a good thing. But I think you made an important point, and it's one that needs to be made. The living wage could even be a first commitment, even before you're talking about the charter, couldn't it? If you're committing to the real living wage and accreditation by the Living Wage Foundation, I think that's the start of the journey in many ways, isn't it, towards good work for everybody. And we're really encouraged actually by a piece of work we've got going through the Living Wage City Region. We've been recognised as the country's first Living Wage City Region. We've got the chair of our LEP, Lou Cordwell, who's driving an action group to that end. And actually, we've very much asked Lou to lead it from the LEP point of view, because it might at times sound to private sector ears as though this is Steve, Tracy and I being a bit do-goody and lecturing and telling them what to do and how to run their businesses. And actually we are, well, okay, we're doing a little bit of that maybe, but and that's not wrong, because we should be encouraging everybody to be as good citizens as they can be, corporate citizens. But actually we've asked Lou from the LEP to chair it, because the big message you've always got to get out is that this isn't just good for individuals or good for society. This is good for business. The businesses that offer the most secure work and the fairest work will be the most competitive, in my view, the most productive, because you'll have a fully engaged workforce that's turning up for work every day, ready to work, wanting to work, committed to the success of the organisation, because they can see that it's treating them properly. Therefore, they will give more of themselves. The most diverse organisations, I believe, will be the best organisations from a competitive point of view going forward, because they're drawing on the talents of all people within their community. So I think this penny is dropping with a number of businesses and organisations, but we need to build it out as a movement, and that's certainly how we're working in Greater Manchester. And I know Steve and Tracy are thinking exactly the same way. Just a last point, Peter: how do we put real teeth behind it? The others have touched on it, but I do think we link it to the decisions we make in terms of public contracting. So here's one very specific example that's moving forward here in Greater Manchester. I say moving forward because the decision I took to put buses back under public control last March, a year ago this March, is subject to a judicial review, and we'll find out the results of that judicial review tomorrow. But the in-principle decision from myself and the 10 leaders is that we will link the process of franchising buses in Greater Manchester to the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter. And that is a big commitment that's kind of, is emblematic, if you like, of our ambitions for the whole of the city region. More broadly, we are going to very much now link it to all public procurement. So using the social value provisions as part of public procurement, linking the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter to that. So, this movement is only gathering momentum. I think we want to build it out across the north. So for colleagues who don't have the misfortune of having a mayor and a combined authority, we don't see why you should be deprived the right to have a good employment charter. Nothing we're doing here, this is the very important point, we're not using devolved powers. We're only using a convening power here. But anyone in any locality can use a convening power. A leader of a council, leader of a LEP, anyone, this is open to anybody to do it. And actually, by us having built out the core strength of GM, West Yorks and Liverpool City Region moving together, then people should take what we're doing and build it into their areas, and we'll all get strength together by building this forward. So, as I said at the start, this is bottom-up change. Bottom-up change is better change. It's more involving change. I think it will be more durable change. I think work across the north of England is going to change after the pandemic. Because we absolutely could not carry on as we were. That should be our shared resolve. Let's level ourselves up now, and let's not wait forever for the cavalry to come over the hill. We can improve people's lives through better work. And thank you to everyone at the CIPD who's backed us from the beginning.
Yeah, and I think Andy, very powerful points. I so agree with that idea of a movement, and that we all have agency in this. We can all do something. It isn't about waiting for central government to tell us what to do. We can get on with these things. And indeed, I don't think we'll ever have central government sort of pushing all of these things in the ways that they actually need to be localized. You've all made that point, that so much of how we see our economies need to be thought about a lot in a more local and regional context, but still building around these very, very core principles of good work, which we've all talked about. One of the areas that I wanted to pick up, because I know, Tracy, you've got to leave in about sort of 10 minutes or so, because I want to make sure you get your train, is the skills debate. And this is such a central part of it. And in the Levelling Up white paper, they've talked about skills. I think there is more work now beginning to happen through things like Future Skills Unit to absolutely understand that the issues of skills do differ across the country. Where are the gaps? Now you talked about that in your comments, Tracy, about some of the things you're trying to do in West Yorkshire and encouraging companies to invest in skills. Because if we're honest, I think across many businesses, we have not invested enough in our workforces and enough in skills. And we are now finding ourselves in a very critical juncture where we know that we have different skills gaps. So let's just hear a few more thoughts from you on that, Tracy. And also, I know Steve has got to go. So Steve, thank you so much. Good luck for tonight. We'll be rooting for you, and look forward to catching up again soon. So thank you for coming.
Andy's not rooting for me.
Yeah, well, possibly not. Well, this is all about a national thing, isn't it?
Let him go before he mentions his footballs, Peter.
It was so funny, an international meeting. For 5 minutes, I thought, oh, he's high-powered. Then you realise it's the football. Thank you, Peter. Absolutely. How do you earn more money is you get more skills. And with 170,000 people in West Yorkshire in work, being paid under the living wage, we've a job to do as leaders. So one of the first things we did was £6 million for Skills Connect. Now, we're very aware we have the responsibilities of adult education, but not everybody can do a 3-year, 1-year course. They may want to do a boot camp. They may want to do something part-time. And actually, the businesses might have a very specific skill. So, for example, I was at a meeting the other day. They were talking about they can't get gelato makers because they don't have the skills. And it's something that we can implement at speed to be agile and to deliver that skills program. At another level, XR Games, a really massive international gaming company, massive contracts from Los Angeles. He's a Leeds lad. He's staying in Leeds, thank Lord bless him. And we're helping him to support training his staff to the next level so that we can keep those Leeds members of staff employed, and he doesn't go to Los Angeles or San Francisco for that talent. So it's on a basic level as well. 52% of the population don't have digital skills, basic digital skills. How on earth in this day and age can you get a job that doesn't involve some sort of digital element, whether that's being a bus driver, whether that's been somebody that works in a supermarket for stock checking? All of those skills are so vital. So we can intervene, we can be agile, and we can be creative. So we know, for example, before I became a Member of Parliament, I was in the creative industries. I know that in the North, we are brilliantly placed to be the next wave of filmmaking, Film Studio of the North. We have the talent, Channel 4, obviously in Leeds, Screen Yorkshire, but we don't have the skills base necessary for companies to come here en masse. So I was able to have the Mayor's Diversity Scheme, where we had young, diverse youngsters being trained in the creative industries so that they will be ready when these creative companies come looking for a skilled workforce. So the joy of the mayoralty is that we can respond quite swiftly. But I do agree with you, Peter. There is more room there for us to work with government and have more agency over that skills offer. I'm frustrated that we're picking up youngsters at 18, 19 rather than 16, because there's a lot of kids leave school and then there's 2 years of what do I want to do? Where can I go? What's for me? If we could intervene there, and some regions in West Yorkshire don't have a sixth form, then we could actually pick youngsters up and get them ready and get them into work. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, with some great initiatives across the region, trying to get diverse youngsters into sectors, excite them about what's out there, and then provide the skills training so that they're ready and fit for work. But it's at the high end to keep that Yorkshire money in Yorkshire and that Yorkshire talent, but also it's at the quite the basic digital skills and apprenticeship levy sharing. I think that's a great scheme that we've introduced. Where I was at a nursery only yesterday, where ASDA have used some of their unspent apprenticeship levy to pay for 10 apprentices in early years. Now, for me, early years is early intervention and absolutely helps us with levelling up and with keeping people, getting people in the right space to have a good and better life. High quality childcare has a massive impact. So there's a bit of a virtuous circle there. So there's loads of initiatives we can do, but I think if we have more agency over skills, we can make a bigger difference and at speed, I would say. But it does feel like Michael Gove is in that space. But whether, given all that's going on at the moment and the positive detail in the white paper itself around skills, I'm not sure that's coming anytime soon, but we'll be making the case. Give us the power and we can deliver.
Yeah, no, thank you, Tracy. And as you said, just keep pushing. I've always believed that an awful lot of the skills agenda is more localized because you want employers. I mean, it's one of the reasons why employers come to places because of the access to local skills. They want to recruit locally. And how employers work with education providers, further education colleges, private training providers, and of course the great universities that exist in places like West Yorkshire. And you have so many students coming across from different parts of the country to university. You want them to stay there because they can see good employment, and that's the way you start to create these virtuous circles. But one of the questions, and there's a lot of comments and questions coming through, is the access to provision. So careers are a very confusing space for a lot of young people, and I think we have underinvested in careers advice and guidance as a nation for a long time. And it's such an important part. Even what you did today, actually, in talking to the school you talked about, is part of that process, isn't it? So I don't know if you've got any sort of quick last thoughts on that space before I know that you have to go.
Yeah, I mean, careers advice in school is not my remit. However, the soft powers of the mayor, I've been able to say to the local authority leaders, tell us what you've got at the moment. Which schools are Gatsby? Where is your 5-star gold plated careers advice? And we can potentially fill in the gaps to have a West Yorkshire-wide careers advice service because, the world of work has changed. And we have a great portal that is really accessed by hundreds of thousands of young people. But how can we make that more effective? How can we have greater reach? And things like, for example, I'm really excited about working with Simon Armitage, the Poet Laureate. We're having a young Poet Laureate competition going into schools. We're having, there's a sculpture scheme and also a storytelling scheme where every child in West Yorkshire will have the same story told to them. So they will have that shared experience. Now, I have no responsibility for schools, but I can, with the soft powers of the mayor, go into schools in a different way and hopefully excite and inspire youngsters to think about other careers. But it is so often about individuals in schools, whether it's the PE teacher who's got an interest in careers or whether they can actually afford a careers teacher. It's a bit patchy, and I think we've got a chance with that bird's eye view of our regions to get a unified, joined up offer that raises the game and the aspirations of all young people across the north.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And of course, through good employers and good work, you're encouraging employers, this is part of the soft power, to come to talk to young people in schools and talk about what good work means, what opportunities mean for them. So, but Tracy, thank you so much. I'm very conscious. I want to let you go because I don't want you to miss your train. I know you'd be
stuck. It's a pleasure because, as you know, in the north, if I miss this train, I've got to wait an hour.
At least, Tracy.
I know somebody who can sort the trains out.
An hour if you're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thanks ever so much for the invite. Bye all.
Thank you, Tracy. So Andy, over to you, and thank you so much for staying a little bit on this. I mean, you've been such a champion, as I said, of so many of these ideas. But yeah, maybe it's just some quick thoughts also on this sort of skills point and what you would most like to see on this levelling up white paper. I think Tracy said it well. I mean, they're lacking of detail, and it may be that just so many other things on government agenda, we're not going to see a lot of difference. But just any sort of general points and thoughts on the levelling up agenda would be interesting, I think, to share with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. Skills is very much on my mind, to be honest, because whenever we have investors in town, and we do have a lot at the moment, I think there's been a little bit of a change in the pandemic. I think a lot of organisations have thought, you know what, maybe we are a bit London and South East based. We do need to rebalance ourselves. So we're getting a lot of inquiries, which is great. But the most common thing I get is, can you guarantee the talent? That's what they say all the time. It's the people they worry about most, not the location. The location appeals, not that's not the problem. The problem is, the talent pipeline basically, and the levels of confidence they can have over that. And it's frustrating for us because, if we had more control over it, we could firm up that commitment. So you're absolutely right to say skill systems should be built from the bottom up, no question. And it's the same with good employment, isn't it? The same principles apply. I mean, I have applied the same thinking, actually, in that I didn't have any powers to do it, but I had my team here create a single portal for work-related opportunity in Greater Manchester, what I used to call a UCAS system for apprenticeships. It's a little more sophisticated than that, but that people might get the basic idea when I say that. So it's called GMAX. You got UCAS for the university route, GMAX for technical education, work-related opportunity. So it's Greater Manchester Apprenticeships and Career Service. And the idea is, that it's one place where young people can see all of the work-related opportunity, but it's good for employers as well, of course, because they get a direct connection with the talent of the future. And there's no kind of word of mouth thing anymore because, young people can go there and find it. And one thing, it launched just before the pandemic, Peter. So it launched in February 2020, GMAX. And we did a survey of our year 10s last year in the middle of the lockdowns, middle of 2021. And one of the questions was, were they aware of GMAX? And 4 in 10 said they were, which I thought was amazing for something that had only launched just over a year before. And it kind of says that young people are out there searching and they find it hard to search. The more easy we make it, I think the more we can drive our own skill system from the bottom up, if you like, the more we coordinate and convene services like that. I just thought on the white paper, I've been invited alongside the Mayor of the West Midlands to have an accelerated negotiation with the government around further devolution, and skills will be right up there. And actually not just post-16, but lifelong, because we're going to have to retrain a lot of people here. If you think about the green economy, the demands of the green economy in terms of the way automotive is going to change, construction is going to have to change. There's a huge re-skilling job to be done as well, isn't there? And the quicker that local areas can kind of move for themselves on all of that, the better off we will be as a country, I think.
Yeah, I think without doubt. And I think it's often forgotten, isn't it, in the education debate, that actually lifelong learning, as you said, is becoming more and more important. And actually, to that point, Pamela's just asked a question, is there any GMAX equivalent for adult skills in education? I mean, I guess when you talk about apprenticeships, it's not just young people coming to GMAX. It presumably would be open to all. Is that right?
So we have some other services for older workers. There's something called Employ GM, which is offering us a similar thing. But GMAX does go up to 30, I think I'm right in saying. So, it's not just for the school age. It's very much focused towards younger school age people, but it's for university graduates as well. So it kind of does go through those, the late teens into the 20s. And we're developing it all of the while, listening to what employers say, Peter. We want this to be a service that's driven by them, to be honest. So I wish I was as tech savvy enough to put a link in the chat. I'm not sure I can chat to you and do that at the same time. But if people Google, it's somebody put GMAX with an X. It's not that actually. It's GMACS, Greater Manchester Apprenticeships and Career Service. You'll find it, and take a look. And anyone who's GM based on this call, please support it and promote it in any way you can.
Yeah, no, that's great, because just a couple of the sort of quick thoughts.
Thank you, Michael Brennan. You're a good man.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, there we go.
You would have exposed my digital skills have been woefully exposed there if you hadn't done that.
You and I both, Andy. But I'll just a couple other quick thoughts on the older worker. I mean, one of the things that's been noticeable through the pandemic now is that older worker participation rates seem to have dropped, which is a really interesting phenomenon. So if you look at the sort of employment rate across the age spectrum, obviously younger people have suffered, but interestingly, older workers seem to be dropping out a little bit. And the question is it because of access to work? Is it access to skills? Do they have the right skills? So actually apprenticeships, we're seeing also, of course, many organizations applying them not just to younger people. They can be applied to any age group. And I just wondered if you would see that as a bit of a phenomenon in Greater Manchester, and if so, is it something that employers are talking about?
Yes, we have. So the I think it's the claimant count is quite a lot higher, and the vacancy rate is also high. So it's it is a concern. I think some have maybe dropped out for not necessarily negative reasons, that they've started their own business or have kind of become self-employed, or anyway, there's some reasons why that may lie, range of reasons that may lie behind. But I think this whole point about helping people cope with change, adapt to change, is going to become increasingly important in this period that we're going into. And one thing that I think Steve and I have, I think Tracy has it as well, is the adult education budget. And I think this is something that could be molded actually to answer the point that you're talking about. So we don't have all the powers we need, but we do have some actually. And adult education, if you go back pre-devolution, when we were given the budget, we were quite shocked actually to find out how scattered it was amongst hundreds of entities, often doing things that weren't particularly work related, courses that were linked to sort of crafts or other things, but not actually that work related. And I've said to the team at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority that I'd like to see the adult education budget particularly pivoted towards digital conversion and green conversion, because I think those are two big calls for older workers. There are gaps in our digital economy, very well paid gaps actually. And, there are opportunities there for people in their 40s or 50s to take if we just gave them that bit of confidence to take a step out of an economy that is maybe in decline and take one into the growth, redirect themselves into the growing areas of the GM economy.
Yeah.
So
Well, I was just going to say, I know that you will continue to push those things and do whatever you can.
I think the boot camps are working, by the way. I think they seem to be going down well. So the government has been funding those, and they seem to work as well. So mixture of adult education, boot camps. Need more of that. Absolutely.
But good to hear you talk about those things. I'm just sort of looking at quite a number of questions here, which are certainly some interesting ones. Certainly commentary about those who have signed up for the Charter, exactly as you said and as Steve said, wanting to advocate to support others, particularly bigger employers. And that sort of leads me on to another question in all of this, because obviously, as I think you've all commented, you can see some of the bigger companies might do this better. It's not a feature of big companies doing this well all the time, but they will often say, look, we've got the resources, we've got the HR teams and all the rest of it. Smaller employers may see some of this as more challenging, supporting living wage, things like that, or even just basic HR practices. And we've done work as the CIPD in supporting SMEs in different parts of the country to try to understand what are some of the basic things that they need to know about. Let's just call it HR practice. And interestingly, it's often about things like employment law, and they were worried that they might trip over things that they're not aware of. And I know it's such an important part of the agenda in every region of the country is support to smaller businesses who don't have all of those kind of resources. And I just wondered your sort of thoughts on that. And certainly those would be areas we'd love to see how we could support more as a community to help small businesses with these kinds of questions.
Yeah. I reeled off the figures before for the supporters and members of the Good Employment Charter. I think it's fair to say that they are majority bigger entities. And I set my team this challenge at the awards event last week. We want to see more companies from the foundational economy, if you like, particularly from sectors like hospitality, social care. I think that's where the Charter can really make a big difference. Retail, where we know people don't get the treatment that they should. It's particularly social care. So there's a move afoot here certainly around the real living wage in social care. And increasingly our councils are actually signing up to commission differently around that. But it's got to be more than that, I think. If you're going to care for other people's relatives, you need security behind you, basically, in terms of, your own position in your life. You won't be able to give good care if you're not cared for yourself, So, it sounds basic, doesn't it? But it's sad that we're in a position where that isn't the reality. So I'd like to see, yes, in terms of, I think I was at an event last week where someone was saying SME should be retired as a term, because medium enterprises are quite different from smaller enterprises, aren't they? And I think you're talking about, I think, people, entities of 10 or less, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. More the genuinely small end or the micro.
I think they're a mixed bag. I'm no expert on this. You will all know more than me, but I think they can be some of the best employers because they are so dependent on their team that they are really attentive to their team. But it's not always the case, is it? In some of those sectors like security, retail, taxis, social care, So I think we do need to, I think that's where we need to go to the areas where the Good Employment Charter can have biggest impact. And we need to kind of maybe enhance the support function. So what can we've got a growth company here that does a lot of small business support, and increasingly we are, the Good Employment Charter is based within our growth company, our business support organization. So, what more can we do to link the good employment agenda to the just the business support agenda, to say that don't see these things as opposites, they're part of the same journey.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, and we certainly have experienced that because people don't, particularly in smaller business, say this is an HR issue, this is a good, it's just a business issue and I need help with it. But the part of the challenge, as we'll know, is how to connect to small enterprise and the different channels and who they pay attention to. And I know that will be on your agenda. But yes, I can see quite a lot of comments coming through on this. The sort of points about the peer support within the membership, which you touched on already, Andy, about people who signed up to the Charter supporting others. But I think we all recognise more to do to support smaller enterprises. And then, as I said, what's the channel of communication to get to them? Because so many of them are just heads down trying to survive. And there's, I think, are things to explore further, aren't they?
I think the word to come back to in that is movement. You latched onto it when I used it before.
Yeah.
And I think it is the right word. How do you create a self-supporting network here? How do bigger entities work with players in their supply chain, and open up some of their HR function or support functions to those smaller entities? I think that's the way to do it, to really build a sort of a support system that's not necessarily a public sector support system, but is actually public and private, doing a bit of that. So this is something that's in development. I detect a really big energy around it right now. I think there's a lot of businesses switching on in a significant way to what we're doing. And the bit that I'd like to do next with the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter is just become more explicit in saying, go out and support these companies that are doing this. Yeah. They've become members. It's a big step. So, let's celebrate them more, whoever they may be. And I reeled off some of those names before. Well, go and buy their products in the supermarket, or switch suppliers to these people, because you should, because they are being good employers here in your area where you live. Therefore, they are worthy of your support. And I think that, for me, is a bit that we need to sort of lean into a bit now. Myself, Steve, Tracy, using our power to say to our own public, you know what? If you're not buying this product, just stop buying the other one and buy theirs, because they are treating your neighbours, your friends, your fellow citizens in a much better way than others.
Yes, it's a sort of fair trade idea in a way, isn't it? But yeah, one of the challenges of that, of course, is transparency of what people are doing. But this is why the movement idea is so powerful, because you create that sort of peer pressure in a way, and people supporting each other, and then working that through the system. But one of the things you've already touched on, and there was a question directly about it, was what you're doing is when you are procuring, to encourage those suppliers to you to demonstrate these sorts of principles. But as you just said, Andy, that can apply to anybody. It's not just what you can do as a sort of public body, as it were. Any organization could do that. They can encourage their suppliers, but it's not just the beating them around the head with a stick. It's how do I support you to get there?
Ian MacArthur, who leads our unit, has just been putting some stuff in the chat there. Ian has done a fantastic job, because actually it's been created actually as a sort of, it's not beating people about the head with a stick. It's quite celebratory and quite encouraging and nurturing, and everyone's on a journey. No one's going to claim that they've got all of this cracked, and we're all trying to improve what we do all of the while. But I think once you're on that journey, you're in the mix. It's such a good place to be. And I think the organisations that are already on the journey are going to be more successful from a business point of view. But I do think we need to sharpen the stick a little bit, if I can put it this way as well. So what I said to you before about public procurement is not an idle comment. We are learning actually now to use social value more. And the great thing about the Good Employment Charter, social value has been a bit fluffy. What is it? It's like, I don't know. We said, everything, isn't it? All charitable works and great things for young people and all of that. But it's kind of hard to measure for that reason, because it's all a bit, slightly nebulous if you're not careful. The Good Employment Charter is a hard, tangible piece of evidence that you are delivering social value. So, we can't say you won't get this contract unless you're a good employer. We can't go that far under the law. What you can say is you'll get more weighting in this contract if you are, and that's powerful.
Yep.
And if you think about all of the GM pound, GMP, Transport for Greater Manchester, and getting kind of quasi-public sector organisations like the universities and, getting all of the NHS trusts and everybody to, really pulling the same direction, the power of that becomes unstoppable if you can really line it up. And then not just say to the main contractors that you're working with that they should be good employers, requiring it from their own supply chain as well. That's where change multiplies out very, very quickly. So I think it is largely carrot and it is largely voluntary, and it's got the right feel for that reason. But we are sharpening the stick here, and there's a few people who might get a jab or two if they're really, particularly the biggest employers who are not prepared to do this. Yeah. The ones who, I'm going to say name no names, but we can guess who some of them are. Big retailers who have big warehousing operations who kind of don't and didn't, do the right thing during the pandemic. And I know who they are. They need to be challenged a lot. They've made a lot of money over the last 2 years, a lot of money, many of them based in delivery and kind of based organisations and the rest of it. And they need challenging, definitely.
I think the other reality of this too, also, as we've all commented, is the context we're in now is that prospective employers and workers who look at these organisations say, I think I might have more choice now. We're in a time of demand, of job vacancies that organisations are finding harder to fill. There's a higher expectation among so many people following the pandemic about, I expect to be treated well. I expect my employer to look after my well-being. I expect my employer to give me more, perhaps, opportunity to work flexibly. All these things have really shifted a lot in the last couple of years. So I think that's the other big pressure for this, which is a business outcome, as you've stressed a lot, that if I don't do these things, I'm going to find it hard to attract and retain the people I need.
Absolutely. My daughter's working in hospitality, just to give you an example, Peter, but the employer was taking liberties and I said to her, look, just leave. And she found one who was trying to pride themselves on doing the right thing, and she's moved, and they are much better. She found it herself. But imagine if that sticker was in the window of that bar, or that one is and that one isn't. That's just good for our young people, isn't it? At the moment they're kind of like having to find out for themselves. I think it should be really plain. This is a good employer, as recognised by the Liverpool City region or Greater Manchester or West Yorkshire. That, in many ways, we're failing our young people by not being that transparent about these things. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think the tables are turned here, and I think hospitality. I mentioned social care as one, but hospitality is another. Yeah. They better wake up to this. They can't. They've too many of them. Many of them are great, by the way, and we have lots of them in our city region. And Sasha Lord is our nighttime economy advisor. Works with and there's a lot of commitment within the sector to improve. But too many have had it too easy and just thinking, well, it's a what do you call it? It's a buyer's market here, and we can just employ anybody at any level we want. I think that's gone, and I think the power is increasingly with people. But we need to. The more we give the transparency over the who is and who isn't, the more we'll drive that movement that you're rightly identifying.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely, as you said, this is a time for change. I can see lots of comments coming in support of these ideas that giving younger people the confidence to feel there are alternatives to poor employment practices. And of course, yes, I mean, as Ian MacArthur just said, increasingly consumers will buy from those businesses that are acting responsibly. And these are agendas I've felt passionately about for a very long time. And I think we're now getting a lot closer to understand what a responsible business actually looks like. And it is so anchored in these ideas of good work and good employment and fair work. So this is genuinely a time of opportunity as well. And I think to look at it positively, which I know you are too, this is a time we can really drive these agendas forward. But I think, as we've all acknowledged, and certainly with a community like the one you're talking to this evening, we all want to help in this. This is a very powerful agenda and a driving force and purpose for a lot of what I believe we do as a profession. And we need to do more of it and stand up and be counted.
You've been brilliant. And I don't just say that because I'm here and I'm being a politician and flattering you. You genuinely have been brilliant. You've been there from the start and you've stuck with us and you've worked with us and you've helped us. So we're really grateful to you all. But I think the reason you've done that is because you know that this is about a stronger country in every respect, isn't it? You know, in terms of our economy and our prosperity, but also in terms of our society and our resilience to face the shocks that are coming at us as a world almost from every angle at the moment. And so, you know, I think the reason in some ways you think, well, it's kind of obvious, but it's not been obvious to the country, has it? Because we've had a short-term approach to things too much. You know, we've just allowed anybody to buy and sell our companies from anywhere. We haven't done the checks on them. You know, we've kind of had a really, you know, it's all been about what can you do for the shareholders this year, not actually, will there still be a company for the shareholders in 5 years' time? You know, there's a culture change that's required here. And I don't know, but I live in hope that devolution is kind of bringing a bit of a culture change. Westminster is too remote from these things. It doesn't think enough about them. But when you sit where I do, absolutely you see how the company right next door, the way it treats people, impacts on our health service. It impacts on, you know, everything that we're doing as a city region. You know, you join the dots at this level and you see how bad work affects us all, as I said at the start, as we did in the pandemic. You know, you can't tolerate it anymore because, you know, it's dangerous actually. And why are we living in times when, you know, mental health is kind of off the scale? Because too many people are so insecure in their position in terms of their income level that, as I say, their mental health is eroded by that. And I just don't see how a business that has people in that position going to work, having been up the night before because they're worrying about everything, how on earth are they going to be able to do a good job for you? I mean, they're really not. So I just think the losers here are going to be the companies who wake up last to this. They're going to be the biggest losers. And the winners are going to be those who see it clearly. And actually, to be honest with you, I also think, and you know, this more controversial point, Peter, but I'm prepared to call out excessive pay at the top, not just sort of be talking for good, fair treatment at the bottom, because I think good organisations are about good teams, aren't they? Where there's a sense of fairness from top to bottom. And I think that is also something that needs to factor into this mix. I mean, you know, we can't mandate it from my level, but I do think, you know, we've allowed too big a gap to emerge between those at the very bottom and those at the very, very top. And as Steve said, that was evident in the pandemic. Those who were out at work and those who weren't, you know, living very different lives in that period. And I just think if you go into Europe, people don't have that divide isn't as pronounced. Everyone is a bit more involved in the kind of sharing the benefits of what's being collectively built. And I just think we've got to get back to a bit of that as a country. I happen to believe it's more likely to be built bottom up by cities, mayors, devolved entities working together than it is any moment of sort of, Parliament all of a sudden having a major moment of insight about this. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So, you know, this movement does need to be built from where we are.
Yeah, I think some of the things that we're certainly seeing emerging, I mean, to your point about the shift of focus and very sort of short-term thinking, and it's all about the shareholder, to much more of these sort of, businesses have a responsibility to all their stakeholders. Of course, their financial owners or financial investors, but their employees, their customers, their suppliers, the communities of which they are part, and the environment. And
I'm not being naive about that. But they've prioritised some of those people over others, haven't they?
They have.
And that isn't actually necessarily a good business decision.
It's not. But I think, there is a much greater push on these ESG ideas and greater transparency and even investors, long-term investors. I was on a webinar earlier today with the Pension and Life Savings Association and various others, all talking about, no, we need businesses to report more on these other things. And
personally, I think
the value.
As a country, we need to just take stock on what we've been through over the last 2 years and how some people have had to live during that time. Yeah. And actually, we should be ashamed, actually, that it took a footballer to come out and say, you know what, some kids won't eat properly if they're not supported with food during the school holidays. I mean, we've kind of not got to the right place here, have we? We've got to have a situation where everyone's got enough security over the basics. If you've not got a society where everyone's got security over work and housing and all of that, you're not going to have a good society. I don't believe, and I personally don't think it's right that we're subsidising low pay to the extent we are, because there are too many people who use food banks who are actually in work. It's just that they can't get enough hours or enough pay to make it all add up together. And that is not a resilient place in which to face a pandemic. And we've got to really do some soul searching here and rebuild. And this Build Back Better is glibly used, and I don't see any evidence of it really happening. Actually, unless not at the national level, but I do see it in what Tracy's doing and what Steve's doing, and hopefully some of what I'm doing and other mayors as well.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And it's been wonderful to chat with you again, Andy, and obviously have Tracy and Steve as well. I think we're very much with you on these things. We believe in the same principles. And the purpose that I called out for our profession a while ago was to champion better work and working lives, because that's good for individuals, it's good for companies, it's good for our economy, and it's good for society. And so much of what we talked about this evening embraces all those ideas. And my final thought is this, which is, and I don't want to be crass about this, but we should not let a crisis go to waste. I mean, crises drive change. And we've got the pandemic, we've got a lot of other things going on, and this is a real time, to put it in the positive, of opportunity to drive these ideas forwards in a very different way. And I think we can see these conversations opening up. But I, again, applaud you for your leadership in this space, Andy, and the others as well. And it's been a privilege to work with you. We will continue to support you. I think you've got a community here on this call who are saying, you know what, we want to help. We want to help what we do within our own organizations, but also being part of this wider movement.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, Daphne. Thank you, everybody who joined the call and has tuned into this conversation tonight. Yeah, it's brilliant, actually, that you do. I'll be honest, I didn't know. I'd heard of the CIPD before I became the Mayor of Greater Manchester, but I can't say I knew you massively in terms of what you did. But I've kind of really come to understand you and value what you do. And thank God, actually, you've been with us on this, because you've been, as I said before, a fantastic partner. So all power to your elbow, all of you, in your different ways in what you're doing to promote this agenda. I think it is becoming unstoppable. The time is definitely now. We're doing a big event on Monday, the New Era in Greater Manchester, and we're calling the kind of great GM we want to see coming out of the pandemic. Better work, good work for everybody, good housing for everybody, cheaper public transport. These are things we shouldn't sort of aspire to as luxuries anymore. They should be for everybody in every community. We'd all be so much stronger if they were. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks for having me tonight. And
thank you,
for all
Andy.
the comments and questions.
Yeah, thanks for staying with us, and enjoy your evening. I'm really conscious that we've run over, and we could have carried on talking all the evening, but thank you. Yeah, thanks to everybody for joining.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.